Today, we are breaking down a massive Hollywood deal. But to really get why it matters, we first need to talk about why all the shows you're streaming are, well, starting to look and feel exactly the same.
So let's just dive right in with a visual mystery I'm sure you've noticed yourself. There's a certain vibe to a Netflix original. You can kind of spot it from a mile away, can't you?
Just take a look at this. On the left, you've got HBO's The Last of Us. See that lighting? It's realistic, it's textured, half of Pedro Pascal's face is literally in shadow. It just feels authentic. Now look right at Netflix's Avatar. Everybody is perfectly lit all the time. There's no real texture, no deep shadows, and even though they had similar, massive budgets, one feels like cinema and the other, well, it just doesn't.
And that very visual difference, that is at the absolute heart of this enormous corporate buyout that's in the works right now. We're talking about a deal that could basically merge these two completely different visual worlds, forever.
So let's back up for a second. How did Warner Bros., we're talking about a legendary studio almost 100 years old, how did it even end up on the auction block to begin with?
Well, this whole mess really goes back to a classic case of a company just getting way out of its lane. Back in 2018, the phone company AT&T bought Warner Bros. They had this grand vision of building a streaming empire. But their big play, HBO Max, ended up losing billions of dollars. That forced this really chaotic merger with Discovery just a few years later, which, only made everything so much worse.
Yeah, see, that Discovery merger wasn't a life raft. It was a giant anchor. It saddled the new company with a crippling $55 billion in debt. With that much red on the books, the new leadership started making some really desperate moves.
And when I say desperate, I mean truly bizarre. The new CEO has started canceling movies that were completely finished, like the $90 million Batgirl film, just to get a tax write-off. And he did all this while reportedly paying himself $52 million a year. It was this chaos that ultimately put a for sale sign on a Hollywood legend.
So, of course, this kicks off a super dramatic bidding war. Paramount comes in with this huge offer, a partnership deal. They're even sending pleading texts to the CEO. And what happens? They get left unread. Why? Because Netflix walks in the door. And even though their initial cash offer was technically lower, they apparently had the Warner board so captivated that they entered into exclusive talks almost immediately.
Okay, so let's dig into what we actually mean by the Netflix look. What is it that causes that feeling that you're just watching content instead of a real movie?
It's this very specific visual signature, right? You fire up a new Netflix original and something about it just screams, made for streaming. You can't always put your finger on exactly what it is, but you can just tell it's a Netflix show.
So what is it you're actually seeing? Well, it's a very specific formula. You get colors that are somehow both dark and way too saturated at the same time. The lighting is so flat that there are no real shadows, which means everyone's face is perfectly visible from every single angle. And you see that same medium close-up shot used for almost every conversation.
And believe me, this look is not an accident. It's really the result of a tech company's approach to making movies. For years, productions were forced to use the same few camera models, and their obsession with 4K means these huge files get compressed for streaming, which means everything looks unnaturally sharp. Not to mention, a huge slice of the budget goes to big-name actors instead of sets, and they even destroy sets after they're done instead of warehousing them. They're just burning money that could go into making the production look better.
But this potential merger isn't just about visuals. It really represents a fundamental clash of philosophies about what a movie is even for.
So, Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos has been very, very clear about this for a long time. He believes that the whole idea of going to a movie theater, sitting in a dark room with a bunch of strangers, is just an outdated concept that doesn't really fit with how people want to watch things today.
And if you want to really understand this mindset, just listen to this. He once proudly told an interviewer that his own son, who's an editor, watched the sweeping epic Lawrence of Arabia, a film made for the biggest screen imaginable, on his phone. He said it like it proved his point, and that is a mentality that absolutely terrifies a lot of filmmakers.
So what does this mean in practice? Well, it means Netflix would almost certainly shrink the theatrical window for big Warner Bros. Movies from the standard 45 or 90 days down to just 1 or 2 weeks. And a change like that would absolutely cripple movie theaters because they really depend on that exclusive time to survive.
So what happens when a tech-first, streaming-first company buys a legendary film studio? Well, here's the thing. We don't really have to guess. We have a very recent and very clear example to look at.
All you have to do is look at the Disney-Fox merger. Disney promised Fox would operate independently, that they'd keep making the same kinds of movies. But what was the reality? Well, Fox's indie film output was slashed, thousands of people lost their jobs, and the historic studio was basically just absorbed and rebranded until it barely existed.
Now, let's get back to Netflix. They operate on a system. They use AI tools to cut costs, and they use algorithms that analyze viewer data to decide when a shot should be cut. It's a system designed to create content that keeps you subscribed for another month, not to create art that makes you want to leave your house. And you better believe that system would almost certainly be forced onto Warner Bros.
Now, facing exactly this criticism, the Netflix CEO has recently tried to walk back his earlier comments. He's making these promises that sound, well, eerily similar to what Disney said right before they swallowed Fox. It's a complete 180 from his long-held philosophy, which really makes you wonder what would actually happen if this deal goes through.
Ultimately, this whole thing really boils down to one fundamental question. As this tech-driven, data-first philosophy potentially takes over one of Hollywood's most historic studios, we all have to ask ourselves, what do we value more? Endless content at our fingertips, or the art of cinema itself? That is the real story to watch here.